Welcome everybody. This is Andrew Jones here at Climate Interactive, and I'm here with Yasmin Zahar and Bindu Bandari from our team. And we're happy to have you here for our Mastering En-ROADS webinar series. You're in the right place if you've come to learn how to use the En-ROADS simulator to make a big difference in the world. We work, of course, closely with MIT Sloan School and the sustainability initiative there to create this simulator that we're sharing with you for free and with many around the world in order to make progress on climate change. We're part of a big team. We are a 12-person think tank based here in the United States. These are many of the members of the team, many of the people who built the simulator and are helping support people around the world in using it. And we're funded by a big group of foundations who really believe in the possibility of significant action to address climate change. Just acknowledging all of them and the support that they've given. And there's an important principle behind what we're doing, about why we're here together. John Sterman said it well, that research shows that showing people research doesn't work. And of course, I have been, for the last 25 years of working on climate change, one of those people who for so long just thought we could say, hey world, there's so much that we need to do on climate change. Let's go do it. Here are the facts. Here's the research. We need to invest in renewables and plant more trees and have energy efficiency and set a carbon price and reduce methane, on and on. Just say that information, show people research. I was one of those people for a long time, but I noticed how difficult it was to engage people that way. And I noticed how much resistance you would get, and experimented over time with this idea of using simulators in order to help people think for themselves and see better futures and help them create better futures in a more often playful way with games, in a more engaging way where they can actually share their own thinking. Basically, I just started to use simulators, and eventually we've come up with one that we think is particularly powerful, and it's called En-ROADS. And we'd like to teach you today the first step in how you can engage people, whether it's your students, your political leaders, your other business people, your community members, whoever it is whom you want to engage, to envision a better future. We'll dig in more, but the basic principle is to ask to other people, hey, what do you want to think about? What do you want to try? And then use this very fast running simulator to imagine, well, what if we had more energy efficiency in transport, more public transportation and efficient vehicles, etc. So what if we had that? What would it do? And so a simulator that runs not in several days, as many do, but runs immediately like this. And that shows, in this case, emissions would go down, oil use would go down, temperature would go down, and people may get an insight about why. So what we're going to do today is to take you through a webinar of teaching you how to do this. This is not just an exercise for us. I'm going to make this nice and big for everyone to see it. Not an exercise just for us to use in the world, but instead to give this to you to use wherever you want. So what I'm going to do today is, right now I'm giving you the motivation why we're even here. We're going to explore a scenario. We're actually going to do a mini version of the workshop that we've built around En-ROADS as a simulator. Then we're going to talk about these two main forms, the game version, the workshop version, and actually a student assignment version. We'll show you many of the resources that are available out there, and then show you some of the dynamics, because the climate system is just fascinating the way that it behaves. Often there are counterintuitive dynamics that usually don't get discussed when we talk about climate action. I'm going to give you some of the advanced facilitation tips, give some ideas about answering the most difficult questions, but overall really introduce you to this 8-part series where every Thursday for the next 8 weeks for 1 hour, now in the morning here in the US, but also in the afternoon, we'll be running these 1-hour workshops 8 of them every week that will empower you to take this tool and make a difference with it in the world. And along the way, we'll have time for questions. And questions and comments are really important because we said we don't like to just lecture at people. So learn a little bit about how GoToWebinar works. You see, here's a little bit of the tips. You can see up at the corner, click on the arrow to collapse the control panel if you want to have it be smaller. Make sure your audio settings are what you want them to be. But most importantly, there's a question box. So go right now, if you would, find the question box and get ready to use it because you're going to need it when we do the interactive part of this. So we're both going to ask you some questions along the way, but also if you do have a question, please write it there right now. Where can I find the simulator? Where are the materials for this? Yazzie and Bindu are both ready to answer your questions. So simple questions, write them right now. We'd love to answer them. If it's a long question, how do you build your confidence in the way the simulator behaves, given that there's a whole suite of SSPs in the integrated assessment models? Long questions like that, please come to the support site. And Yazzie or Bindu, could you in chat send people this link to the support site at Freshdesk? Many of the questions have been answered already, or you could submit a new ticket, we call it, to have the question answered. So again, why are we here? I showed you the first argument, which is research shows that showing people research doesn't work. We need a different way to engage people to think for themselves, to think on their own terms, to avoid the crossed arms of people saying, oh, I'm not with you, you're just trying to lecture at me. We're trying to find different ways to engage, but also we're really trying to turn the tide on CO2 emissions. Here is a graph from 1900 of carbon dioxide emissions growing over time. And because this webinar is in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, I would just note that as much as this time seems to indicate that emissions are going to go down. You see these emissions have been growing and growing and growing through the 1910s and 20s and 40s and 60s and 80s, growing, growing, growing. It's expected as much as a 5% drop in emissions. And air quality is getting better in many parts of the world. The forecast is that those emissions will be the red dot this year. They'll fall significantly. However, we see when we model this and we imagine the future, this is not a durable, sustainable solution to climate change. Other recessions in history, look at these as Spanish flu back here in 1918, the Great Depression, World War II ends, oil shocks, even the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. See that drop right there, and its emissions sprang back up over the next couple of years to grow again. It's very likely that emissions may jump up again unless the world responds in powerful ways to change the underlying infrastructure driving emissions. The infrastructure of developing coal, oil, and gas reserves, all of the processing in the energy system, burning the coal, oil, and the gas, the transportation infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, habits, the way the economy works. These are the things that would need the food and ag. These are the things that would need to be transformed to sustain what we need, which would be those emissions going down to net zero by about 2050 or so. So that's what we're about with En-ROADS. What would be the changes that would be kicking in over the next decades that would lead us to get our handle on addressing climate change? Okay, so here we are. Let's run a really short version of what we call the En-ROADS Climate Workshop. And the En-ROADS Climate Workshop is how we are inviting you to engage other people. There's another form, which is a role-playing game that I'll discuss in a minute. And there's a student assignment where you just give people an assignment, they go off and play with the model. But I'd like to show you what you might do online with your colleagues, where you ask them a simple question. And I'll ask that simple question right now, which is, okay, here is a future for climate. I'm going to undo the scenario and ask you, given a world starting with a world of a business as usual future, where you see on the left, here's coal in brown growing over time in a pretty pessimistic future, but there's a lot of coal in the world. And when you particularly think of China and India and Indonesia and Australia and South Africa and Mexico and Brazil, these are all countries, except actually not Brazil with the coal, but many of these countries developing new coal resources. It could grow as much as this. Oil peaking out here in the 2060s in this possible future. Natural gas in blue, wind and solar and other renewables here in green, nuclear, and then in bioenergy. Given this future, what would be an alternative? What is an action that might create a very different future? For this case, for this next graph, which is greenhouse gas net emissions, carbon dioxide, methane, N2O, the F gases, and an alternative to creating a future of 4.1 degrees C warming. Of course, what we want to do is get that 4.1 down to 2.0. So I'll just say, what shall we try? What would be an interesting test of something that we could implement as part of the economic recovery in order to bring our lives and economies back after this COVID-19 crisis? What would be an action that would both help with economic recovery, and also create a better future for the climate? So please write into your question box, what would be something that you'd like to test? And Yazzie and Bindu, are you seeing any answers there in the question box? What are you seeing as responses? And then we're gonna try it here in the model.
Yeah, so we have someone saying working at home,
Working at home, yes.
less transportation,
Maybe
renewable
let's
energy.
hear 4 or 5 of them. I'd be curious to see the range of what people, yeah, please keep going.
Yeah, so we've got renewable energy, decreased deforestation, retrofitting houses, a carbon price, increasing nuclear use.
Nuclear, great. All
Less
right,
coal.
so less coal.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting, like what will be going into, there were so many you just said of less coal and transport energy efficiency and retrofitting houses. One thing that's powerful about the model is that you'd be able to try many different things when you play with it yourself. But for now, let's just take them one by one. Someone said retrofitting houses, and of course, there's such an opportunity. So many people are at home. This is their chance to finally insulate their roof. This is that chance to make your buildings and every place is much more energy efficient. So I'm going to focus there of these 18 different levers. And by the way, we do have this slide, and actually, yes, Bindu, could you send this to people right now? This is the En-ROADS control panel. So this is what you would do, is you would send people, before you engage them online, send them this document, and it shows all the levers I was just showing you, see here in the middle. It has a short description of each of them that explains what exactly we're talking about. I was just focusing on buildings and industry energy efficiency, increase or decrease the energy efficiency of buildings, factories, appliances, and other machines, which is the lever right here. This is a really helpful guide. And there's also more material that's even a level deeper. So I was talking about energy efficiency in buildings and industry. And so what you do is you click on these 3 buttons, and a level deeper, you get to see a bit more information. Over here on the right, Yazzie, you've been working so hard on this. This is the information about what are the examples of this. Individuals and businesses, insulating buildings, purchasing energy efficient technologies, HVAC systems, government policies, research and development, some of the dynamics, equity considerations, co-benefits, what the assumptions mean. And you'll notice that you're going to want to use this at 2 levels. Here, you don't need to know any numbers. Notice that all you have to do is imagine status quo and then change it from there. But also, if you like the numbers, you're going to want to know, well, we do make an assumption that the energy intensity of this sector, the new technologies are already improving at 1.2% a year. You can see right here. So you can make that improve faster. such that this line of the energy intensity of GDP falls more quickly, that it takes fewer exajoules per $1 trillion. If you like really digging into the numbers, that's what's going on here over to the right, and you can increase it. Now at this moment, it's really critical. Don't just click the button and see what happens. Instead, you ask the question. Think, what would change in this system if we, in buildings and industry, used everything more efficiently? Over here on the left, look at these graphs, coal, oil, gas, and renewables. What would change? Which of these lines would go up and down? Think, where do we get most of the energy in buildings and industry? Well, it's not oil, so that red line of oil probably isn't going to move. That's for about transport. Well, it's probably going to be where we get our energy. There's coal, there's oil, there's coal, there's gas, there's renewables. Renewables, wind and solar, are we going to need more wind and solar or less? We'd kind of like more. However, with energy efficiency, probably all sources of electricity would go down. My point is, think before you click. You gotta think, and you gotta ask your people to think. So we're thinking, then we're gonna try it. And you're also maybe imagine how much is this gonna go down on the right, but the main thing I want you to think is in the system. So I'm just gonna increase that a good bit. In this case, 3.3%. There's a great button here, and I'm gonna actually make it full screen. I love this button, replay last change. See this one right here? Click it, and then watch several times. You can see, what does it do? First, start in the bottom right. Does it actually change the energy efficiency of the economy? Yes. See the blue line departing from the black? Now note, it takes a long time to ease in. It's not like overnight. Technologies last 10, 15 years often. So you have to wait for the old stuff to depart, new stuff to come in, some retrofitting, but it does take a while. I'm going to click the button again, and we're going to see what happens. What changes the most? Well, we need a lot less coal. See the brown line going down? A lot less gas in blue, a little less wind and solar. Wind and solar is doing well, but we need a little bit less. So you can see some interplay between solutions. And then 4.1 goes down to 3.7 because greenhouse gas net emissions drops. Instead of increasing, it actually flattens over time. So there is an important action. Did it help? Yes. Did it save the world on its own? No, not at all. It helped a good bit. Now I want to send you this, and you can take a closer look at this scenario, what you can do and what you should encourage your folks to do, and I really hope you do. Go to share your scenario. You can copy your scenario link. You can share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. I'm going to copy the scenario here, and I'm going to go into, I hope, there into chat, and I just sent you a link. So go into chat, and you can now look at this exact scenario and experiment with it yourself. Maybe if the webinar slows down, go play with the model a little bit. I'm going to pause there. There's one test of the policy. Yassi or Bindu, any suggestions or questions that came up as I was showing this one, or anything so far?
We're getting a lot of good engagement from folks, mostly people wanting to see more solutions being tested. So I think you're good to go ahead and keep exploring them.
So what we're going to do, and I've really shown you one test, and you can imagine what this is what usually happens. So we had a meeting right around the time of the Paris Agreement. It was 2015. We were invited to the Secretary General's office of the United Nations. He had a climate team of 11 people, and they had heard about our simulator. An earlier version of this, the interface was not nearly as good. John Sturman and I got invited to do a 20-minute presentation. And so we get up there with this 12-person Secretary General's climate team right before the Paris Agreement. Really intense time. We really hoped that we could help people's thinking on what actions were needed to get us to the goal of well below 2 degrees or 1.5. 20-minute briefing, and we ran one policy like this. The idea was to do what has been 20 minutes, and then we were supposed to be gone. But this is the moment when you show it to people, and what's happening right now happens, where they say, wait, What about deforestation? What about GDP per capita? What about renewables? What about methane? What about carbon removal? What about coal? What about a carbon price? People suddenly flood you with questions. And what happened to us in the UN was our 20-minute meeting became an hour-and-a-half meeting. And suddenly, instead of begging for time, they're begging you for time. This is one of the important things that happens when you have a really engaging tool that allows people to think for themselves. So in that way, as much as you're saying you'd like to test more things, I'm going to need to move on, but invite you, because what's going to happen soon is we'd like you to join and come to an actual workshop. This is a training on how to do it, but what we're going to do is going to be running several workshops. And the next one that you should put in your calendar, and Yazzie and Bindu, can you send them the invitation to this one in GoToWebinar, or send them the link to this? We're going to run a full workshop. It's not a training. It is literally what we did with the UN Secretary General's office, or with Jay Inslee here in the US government, or with Sheldon Whitehouse, or with some Republican leaders here in the US Senate. May 19th, 7 a.m., 2 p.m. Yazzie, Bindu, were you able to find that link to the sign up?
Yes, we've just sent.
Great. So come and see a full version of the workshop. But just to play out what happens, here we made one change. I heard you mention many other things that you would like to see, and here's how it plays out. In the same way, someone said deforestation, and we show some other graphs. Of course, there are many other graphs that you can see. This is one of my favorite ones, stacked graphs of deforestation emissions, and here's energy CO2 emissions, F gases, methane, and N2O. And what we'll say, if we did the full version, when someone suggested deforestation, we'd say, think about what would it do? Deforestation emissions of that green area. If the green area shrinks, you can look and see, boy, that's not a lot of the emissions. So it couldn't make that big a difference. True, but it's important. 3.6 degrees, 3.7 down to 3.6, and then on and on. You engage people to think about each action as they add up, but overall, the next step is to create a vision of success. Help people see, if we had more renewables, if we had a carbon price, if we push back on coal and oil and gas, if we promoted energy efficiency in our transportation system, if we electrified some of these systems, if we grew more trees and cut methane and we had a little bit of carbon removal, we could get well below 2 degrees. Now, you wouldn't do this yourself. It's not about your vision. You are cultivating people's capacity to see a future that they want to be part of. And then you're going to ask them, as I would ask you right now, two big questions. Question number one, what would you love about being part of a world on track to make this happen? And I'll just ask you real quick, and anyone who has the time, write in questions. What would you love about waking up in the morning knowing that you are part of a community of people committed, you already are in some way, committed to making this happen, this kind of scenario of limiting warming to no more than 2 degrees? How would that feel? So write it down. We're not going to have time to really dig in, but write it down, say it to yourself. And then secondly, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What is the next right action? Whether it's a simple thing in your day today, whether it's a commitment over this year, whatever it is, at whatever scale, what is the action that you want to take? So what you're doing is helping people see the basics. There's no silver bullet. We noticed that one thing we did at the start, way back then, that one action, even a huge change in energy efficiency, that's not a silver bullet. And even wonderful things like a carbon price, it's not a silver bullet either. There's no silver bullet. Instead, what's needed is action all across the board. And when you put all those actions together, and it's not everything, some things are more powerful than others, but it's more like silver buckshot. How we like to say it is, you can't plant a garden with one seed. You can't plant a garden with one seed. You got to plant a garden with many, many seeds. So that's the second insight you're going to deliver. The third is that it's possible. we still can technically limit warming to no more than 2 degrees. Number 4, you'll see it's essential to keep coal, oil, and gas safely in the ground. There are no scenarios here where we don't cut the emissions of fossil fuels significantly. So you're going to deliver those insights, you're going to help people see what they love about it, and then you're going to ask them what they're going to do. Because the whole point of this is that last question: what are you going to do about it? I'm going to pause. That's kind of the overview of what we're trying to do with the workshop built around this. Any questions or comments that are coming up, Yazzie or Bindu, that you think deserve a little bit of attention at this time? And I'm going to send you a link to this scenario in case you want to see a 1.9 scenario.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great questions. So thanks everybody for your patience. We have a few hundred of you on at the moment, so we're doing our best to answer your questions. I think maybe an important question to maybe address now, I've seen a couple times, is people are asking if this is modeled at the global level or if you're looking at a particular country.
Fantastic, great question. So global, this is a global model. So you're going to be talking about your business, your community, your neighborhood, your country, your state. Very few people work on global policy. So you use this global model to think globally, then you act locally. So an important transition will be, here's some general principles about what's needed. There's no silver bullet. It takes many seeds to plant a garden. We need to keep coal, oil, and gas safely in the ground. We still can do it. Then you think, what's going on here in my town? What's going on here in my business, in my country? What can I actually affect? You've got to make that transition. Think globally, act locally. And the other thing about acting locally along the way is to apply the principle that this isn't just about the climate. If we don't also address and improve justice and equity, what's the point? So along the way, we really want you to be thinking about how to incorporate other principles that really matter, both as a way to help get traction for action, but also make sure we come up with things that solve the system. So we really need justice and equity, and we call that approach to addressing all of them together multi-solving. There's a lot of resources on our website about this. One of the ways to think about it is what we call FLOWER, this framework for long-term whole system equity-based reflection. Here, climate protection is the middle of the flower, but the many benefits come out of thinking about the whole system. More jobs and assets, addressing food and water, resilience, energy, industry and mobility, connection and health, well-being and safety. The scenario you just created will improve air quality, respiratory health, which we know is so critical right now at the time of COVID-19. We need to think about these things all together, and we have a lot of resources to help you think that way about it. This topic, by the way, is going to be, I think it's webinar 6 in this series of 8. This is webinar 1. Number 6 focuses on this idea of multi-solving, using En-ROADS to make connections to health, equity, justice, and well-being. So here we are with this possibility. I've showed you, we've got this simulator, we've embedded it in a workshop, and we'd like for you to think about where you might use this in the world. We found this to be incredibly useful in all 5 of these different sectors: business and finance, government, media, education, civil society. And we're actually quite curious about where you might use it. So I'm going to open up a poll. Love to hear from you. Which sector do you work with the most? Civil society, education, government, business, or other? We're really curious where you might be applying these, and that'll help us a little bit as we cater this for you all. Oh, wow, you're doing a great job. You're voting really fast, and clearly, here they come. Many of you are voting. So please go to your poll button within the GoToWebinar control panel, or maybe it popped up there for you all to see. Wow, you're voting really well. Right now, education is winning. Civil society, education, government, business. Right now, education is the top one. Boy, 70% of you voted. Keep voting, and we'll see what you come up with. Oh boy, it's great that you all have learned to use this so well. All right. So I'm going to close the poll and we're going to see the results. So 35% education, a third of you. Civil society, or next one was government, business, and civil society. Wow, it really is spread over those four. Maybe there's a little more in other. Great to know. Thank you. So given that, in here is I didn't ask about media, but one place, of course, you may have seen this, seen our simulator, and what might have brought you here is Bloomberg Green. Yazir Bindu, can you send the link to, I think I actually have it up here. If you'd send this link to what was published recently. You may have seen this in Bloomberg just 2 weeks ago, April, right on there on Earth Day. They adapted En-ROADS into an interactive here where you can make changes. It was very simplified, but it's a good example of an application, a really simplified version of our En-ROADS simulator. So please send it to everybody. Yale covered it here, Fast Company, Axios, and Inc. You may have seen it in some of these settings, but the way that you all have been using this, and when I say you all, it's the whole community of people over this last year, but really the model's been built. We've been building it and using it for 9 years now. This started, I was part of the team that built it starting in 2011. But these events are being run globally. 40 plus remote events already, many of them online. Here you can see us running it on Zoom, where interactively engaging people as I am with you, but what we're inviting you is you could be the person using some of these online platforms to engage other people to think about climate strategy. Here's one example of Molly Sullivan, a colleague of ours from Virginia here in the US, and she is what we call a En-ROADS Climate Ambassador. And our invitation to you is to use the simulator, but to take the time to go through all 8 of these trainings and then engage a couple groups with it, take a test to make sure you really understand the dynamics well, get feedback from people, and then we are designating people En-ROADS Climate Ambassadors. Molly took the time to do that, and here she is engaging her students. You see a picture down here. There are her students. Here's the scenario that she's creating. As an educator, she's been helping her students think about climate using this tool. Alice Schmidt over in Austria in the same way, engaging her colleagues, creating this scenario in En-ROADS. Particularly as these are 2 examples of educators, like a third of you out there are, as a way to give people the simulator, have them think about it, and what they're doing actually is using what we call the En-ROADS student assignment. And I'm going to take you to the resource here. Here is the our overall website, and underneath, I'm going to go to under En-ROADS, tools for online use. So if you would send this, Yazzie, what we have is what's called the En-ROADS guided assignment. So if you'd send this page to everybody right now, so the third of you are educators, imagine the possibility of either engaging people as you just saw, or showing this 20-minute video, which is a slower introduction than I gave you a few minutes ago. Show them this video that says, here's the simulator, and then what you're able to do is just download the assignment either as a Word document where you could adapt it yourself, or just give them this. I teach a class of business school students, and I gave them this exact assignment, and it leads them through the job of using En-ROADS, creating a world that they'd like to see in the future, meeting some goals, and reflecting about what the results were. How did you do? Here are the questions that we ask the students. Okay, so some of the other examples of people using this, I'd like you to imagine you in these shoes of somebody engaging folks on Zoom like this, where they're thinking about En-ROADS futures. Some of the people who have done it have shared their results on Twitter. Here's Nikki Zimmerman over in England. She's actually a German professor who is posting about her system dynamics students creating a 1.6 degree scenario. Here's Sean Daig, Mid-Hudson Citizen Climate. So what's important here is a distinction. The person on the left is an educator, on the right is a climate activist. In this case, Citizen Climate Lobby, an NGO, a non-profit organization that is engaging political leadership to enact a carbon price. So this is an example of engaging people with this sort of tool. Isaac Emery and others. Here is Tariq Meliani, who is with Cargill. So this is a business application. He actually presented to the CEO of Cargill about agricultural emissions and how that fits into actions that will address climate. Johanna Ryan's in New York City chapter of a climate activist group with youth, Jeroen Struben, who's a professor. Here's a group recently in Tanzania. You can see those group gathered around EnROADS. So those are examples of many EnROADS climate ambassadors in the world. Some of the history, I think I mentioned before, of our working with the Secretary General's Office of the United Nations. This is John Sturman, who one of the developers of the model with Ban Ki-moon. Some members of the US Congress. This is me presenting with a representative from the House, a member for the House of Representatives, a Republican, and noting that this is a particularly helpful approach with people who disagree with each other. Right now in the US, we don't have a lot of support from the Republican Party to take action on climate. This was a very helpful way, as he said, to support a thoughtful conversation. Bill Nye, the science guy, got to present to him and have him create his own 1.9 degree scenario. John Kerry, the former Secretary of State here in the United States, quite simply a game changer, he said. In business, here's Andrew Greenspan of HSBC. They've been promoting this with sustainability leaders in corporate America. HSBC has been a supporter of this. There's Tariq again. In the Green Biz, this was the top rated event at the Green Biz Workshop in Arizona this February, the very top rated event, or here at the Bloomberg Conference in New York City. Overall, with our main and our past workshop called World Climate, we've had 62,000 participants around the world. So our invitation to you is to become one of the people engaging others and telling us about it and registering your event that and putting it on the map. There is a place on the website that after you run an event, what you'll do is you'll go here to gonna go to the overall website and run a workshop. Here's the page about the workshop. And then down here, there's a video about it, but down there is a big area to share your event. Download a flyer, find a facilitator, but register your event. So you'll type this in and tell us about where it is so that you can be on that page with all the different facilitators. Here are the ones right now for the EnROADS climate workshops and the EnROADS games. I'm going to pause for a second. Anything that you would want to add, Yasmin or Bindu?
Drew, yeah, some basic questions. I see it repeating multiple times. So the first is people are curious to know if this video recording will be provided to them. Yes, of course, we plan to do that. And the next question is about the translation. So if you can address this sometime.
So we're translating this into 15 languages. It's not going to be done immediately. If you know somebody who is a philanthropist who wants it to be translated, let us know because we'd love to hear about it. We're raising money to do the translation right now. It will be translated. When it comes to videos, here on the page, could you all send the link to this page of videos? So there are videos that offer explanations. So for many of the actions you saw. So this is John Sturman explaining electrification of buildings and industry. Here are videos of many of the different levers being moved. Game facilitation. Here's the full event, a full video of the EnROADS climate game or the You can see videos of the workshop itself. So if you don't have the time or you're not able to join some of the events, come and watch one of these videos. Also, the video of this event will be shared. Yasmin, anything you see that I should add?
I think, yeah, a lot of people are asking some great questions. We've got folks excited to become ambassadors. I think you can keep moving. Just reiterating Bindu's point, we'll be sending the recording as well as these slides, as well as all of the links that we've been posting.
Great. So we've really been covering the workshop, and this is the way that you engage people to think about what we're going to do on climate change using En-ROADS. Workshop number 2, this is next week in 7 days, will be a focus, more deep dive, how to lead the En-ROADS climate workshop, May 21st. The second form that we want to share, actually it's the third, I showed you the student assignment. So you think of this, the workshop, the student assignment, and now the game. Climate Action Simulation is a role-playing game version. And it's better for people who are even newer to climate action. You noticed that to start out with the questions I asked you before, what do you want to do about climate? There are many people who couldn't answer that question. They don't know where to start. So we offer a way for people to get immersed in the challenge by playing a role in this game. So the way it works is that you have a UN official. It's me as Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, in the role of the Secretary General, calling an emergency summit to address global climate challenge. And we have 6 stakeholder groups saying, how can we take action? What challenges or opportunities does the COVID-19 pandemic present? And then here are the groups. So we break up, and you would break up your group into conventional energy. Here we have Rex Tillerson, the former Exxon CEO, playing the role of the coal, oil, and gas companies from around the world, not just the United States. So this is Saudi Aramco and Petrobras and Sinopec, all these global companies, Shell and Chevron. Climate Justice Hawks, Greta Thunberg and Free50.org and Extinction Rebellion and Sunrise Movement and Sierra Club and Citizen Climate Lobby. Commerce and Industry, so Chambers of Commerce, Corporate America, sitting over here. Clean tech, wind and solar and other new technologies. Xi Jinping, Angela Merkel, Donald Trump, Emmanuel Macron, Narendra Modi, world governments, the leaders of island nations, Africa, all around the world, representing governments, and then Brazil and Indonesia and Cargill and all of the land, forest, and ag companies. Secretary General makes a speech, and then you can imagine what happens is they start debating and negotiating, and we give these backgrounds with the flags or the representative of the groups, and people really get into it, and the drama happens. People get mad at each other and in their role, and it really gets people engaged deeply. Remember what I said before, research shows that showing people research doesn't work. So it's really a powerful experience to have people play a role, get into the debate, and see if they can create a scenario well below 2 degrees. The game works really well. Bindu and Yazzie on the team, you all have led it lately. Actually, I'll just turn it over to either of you. Like anything either of you want to add about a moment that you liked, what you like about leading the game because you've been engaged with it lately. Actually, so Yazzie, anything that you'd want to add about what you particularly have enjoyed about leading the game and what you think is powerful?
Yeah, the game has been really great for people maybe who aren't as familiar with climate issues.
Yeah.
And gives them the tools to really learn as we're playing the game and learn with whoever else is on the call. So it's really nice to see that collaboration and learning happen, and then the engagement in this role-playing side.
Great. Bindu, anything you would add about what you think is good about the game?
Yeah, just to add, it's so fascinating to see how people dive into those roles And in a way, in the feedback, in the debrief session, they share that how this enlightened broader perspective for them and how they have seen different issues from broader viewpoint. So that's really interesting to hear.
Great, thank you. So where you can find more information, and if you would send the link, Yazi and Bindu, here under tools, actually I just scroll down on the main page, workshops and games. And you can see right here, here is the En-ROADS Climate Workshop, but here's Climate Action Simulation, game, and all the materials are here. The features of the game, learn how to lead it, and under the materials, we mentioned that people play the role. To play the role, you need to know how to play the role. And for example, you could go here and then here is that sheet of paper that says, here is the confidential note that goes to conventional energy team that says, oppose a high carbon price, for example. And it just shows you how to play that role really well all on that website. So some of the other, I guess, key topics, and of course the slides are there, all the materials that you need, and on workshop 3, we're going to, actually that's, webinar number 3 will be how to lead the game, and that's on May 28th. By the way, we studied our other game and found that 83%, I think it's 81, I think I need to change that, of our workshop participants reported they're more likely to take action. We did a peer-reviewed journal article on the game to find out if it works, and it does. So go read the paper about it. All right, so I just wanted, in the context of kind of showing you more about what we're going to teach in the workshop in the later, in the later trainings, how to answer some of the top questions. There's one thing that I would recommend that you memorize, and I didn't use it early on, but I do use it when we have the full version of the workshop. Somebody early on will ask you this question. They will say, where did you get your data? And you could get ahead of the game and answer this question when you show the model the first time, but it is the only thing you need to memorize. And it is these 5 points. And you might say, the first time you show the simulator, you will say, here's En-ROADS. Climate Interactive and MIT Sloan built En-ROADS using the best available science that was out there. With sources such as the IEA and the IPCC reports, all the parameters and equations are shared in our 400-page reference guide that's on the website. And actually right now, Yazi and Bindu, can you send the link to that, to the reference guide? So it's lays out all the assumptions in the model. And we calibrated En-ROADS to match the behavior of the large disaggregated models that are out there. And for you to understand, there are research teams around the world that have built really large models that are research models about the same dynamics and the same questions that we've modeled. They run more slowly, but they have a different purpose. They're research models. So we calibrate En-ROADS to say, can we capture the same dynamics as those models, even as we have a separate purpose? There's some different acronyms here you can see for what they're called, but we calibrated. That's one way that we build our confidence as we tested the model. And if anyone doesn't like the assumptions that we made, many of the assumptions are actually changeable. So here we were with a 1.9 degree world, which showed, well, I'm just gonna redo this. Say we have renewables growing, and some people said, well, gee, what if we had more growth in renewables? Well, under simulation, under assumptions, you can change many of the assumptions in the model if you don't like them. We don't say we're right, everyone else is wrong. We say, how do you see the world? And what would be the implications of different ways of seeing the world? It's kind of a subtle way to think about it. But in this case, with renewables, some people say, oh, that the learning effect in the model, this is an important factor. Every doubling of cumulative installed capacity in the renewable sector decreases that price of renewables. In this case, 20%. That's captured by the number right here of this progress ratio, which is 0.8 or 1 minus, so 1 minus 0.8 is that 20% improvement. What if it's faster? What if it improves 30%? watch, if I change this down to 0.7, you can see that renewables in green, see that changing? It grows a little faster, it keeps a little more coal in the ground, and temperature goes down to 3.8, not 3.9. My point is, if people don't like the results, they can explore a little bit of real-time sensitivity testing. So this is the one thing you should just memorize. Make this speech, 5 points. And along the way, it's good to know what I just mentioned before about how we test the model. Webinar number 8 is, I think, totally intellectually fascinating. So nerds out there, make sure you come to this one. How do you build confidence? How do you test a model like this? You compare it against history. This is an example of coal from 1990 to 2015. Here's the history of coal. Does our model capture the history of what's happened from 1990 to the present in coal? Does it capture the baseline future of what other models, and this captures 6 other integrated assessment models, does it capture what those other models do, as well as other forecasts such as the Shell mountain scenario? And then if you put in a carbon price, are we similar to other models as well? So I'm going to now click the button and you see En-ROADS in blue, basically close to the history of coal, close to the baseline in the future, and close to this test in the future. That's one of the ways that we test the model, but not just for coal, but also for GDP, energy intensity, methane, oil, temperature, gas, hydro, nuclear, bio. You can imagine we need to capture many of the other scenarios, but also the ones that go to different, they're called radiative forcing levels. Now this is really nerdy. You don't need to understand all of this in order to engage people, but just wanted you to show you a bit of how we do some of the testing. Much more on this topic in the June webinar. A few more points along the way, and I'm checking my time to see what we got. Yeah, we still have a few minutes. Some of what you're doing is engaging people with a mathematical model. Some of which you're doing, though, really focuses people on what you need to focus people on is how to cultivate their ability to build their commitment to take action. A lot of what you're up to is playing 4 different roles. So workshop number and webinar number 7 will focus on how, as a facilitator of the workshop of the game, you play these roles. And we're going to help you do it really well. Partly you're just a coach, like I am with you today. I believe in you and your capacity to be a powerful climate leader. And I'm trying to orient myself to helping you be all you can be in getting the results that you really want. That's what a coach does. Also, I'm playing a role and putting on my hat as a professor. I'm trying to explain to you things about the world, whether it's about climate or the use of models. Early on, I did that with energy efficiency. Here's how energy efficiency affects the overall economy and affects the climate. I wanted to teach you some things, and I hope that I played that role well. A third role is playwright. You're cultivating a discovery experience with highs, with lows, with disappointments, with possibilities. You're creating some drama as you go through the highs and lows of a learning experience for people. And fourth, you're a traveler along with your people. I'm just Drew Jones, another person who cares more than you can ever know about what a pickle, what situation we're in. And I'm here with you as someone else just trying to make a difference with all the humility and the experience of the brokenness of this difficult world that we're facing. So partly we just get to be people together trying to make a difference. So notice the hat that you wear at different times. You will play these 4 roles in different ways. Notice what you're doing. You're switching hats. Be okay with the switching around of roles and choose to make sure that you show up in these 4 roles. But overall, it's this kind of mode, helping people think more groundedly. The term we use is grounded hope. You're cultivating grounded in the science, grounded in the way that this complex system works, but you're cultivating hope, that sense of possibility that we can actually get to a better future. There will be many more facilitation techniques throughout the webinar series. So overall, what we're doing is we're trying as an organization to cultivate ambitious climate action with this community of climate ambassadors. We want you to be part of our 7,700 people around the world. That's 1 in a million humans. There are 7.7 billion people on Earth. We want to have 1 in a million, that's 7,700 of those people engaging others using these tools with an inclusive approach, including equity and justice. So the invitation is to join for all of these webinars. Here's the series. We're just concluding number 1, En-ROADS 101, how you engage people. Number 2 will be a deep dive into just the workshop. Then number 3, just the role-playing simulation game. And if you're interested in just one of those 2, just come to the one that's most appropriate. You don't need to come to one that isn't relevant. Then there are going to be 2 on just the dynamics of the simulator, because this simulator, the system, behaves in counterintuitive ways. We want you to know how to explain the behavior well. Then number 6 on multi-solving. Then number 7, advanced facilitation. And then the testing and confidence building in the simulator. So once you go through these, what you'll do is you'll attend the webinars, read the materials, watch videos or watch other people lead them, and then practice. Lead 2 sessions yourself. You'll get constructed feedback from 5 different people and complete a learning-oriented, non-evaluative test. And then you submit a form. And if you do all those things, then you become a climate ambassador. Da-da-da. And I'm gonna open that page. If you all could, Yazzie and Bindu, if you could send this link to people. Here is the page, and here are all of you, and here are the 138 around the world. Join this group of people and use the simulator. And one note is, as you're thinking about running this and learning it, you could invite people. You could click on one of these buttons and say, oh, Rod McDonald, I'd love to see what he has in the world. And oh, there's Rod, and he's got more information on him. But we also invite you to be one of these people yourself. Overall, though, what is the biggest payoff? Why should you do this? You don't want just your name on some silly website. What you want to be part of course, is being part of what humanity is doing today, which is bending this curve from the red line of this reference scenario towards a world we don't want, towards these green lines of well below 2 degrees with an effort to get all the way to 1.5. We invite you to be part of this world, part of this community of people, and overall apply the passion you have, your intelligence, your ability to engage other people with others who are going to support you on our team, with other ambassadors, to make a big difference in this world using the tools that we have. They're proven, they're powerful. Overall, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. So go get them. We will stick around right now and answer other questions if you'd like to stay on the line. But this is the end of the workshop. Please join us in a week for webinar number 2. We'll be here for a few more minutes, but overall, go get them. All right, I'm going to turn it over and ask Yazzie and Bindu the top questions that you've heard. We will stick around for a few more minutes, but any questions that you heard that you think particularly note?
Drew, yeah, I see a good number of people familiar with our tools, zeros. So there have been questions, many questions about what is the difference if
Great question.
versus replacement or so.
Yeah, all right. So the question, as I heard it, what is the difference between En-ROADS and 𝐶ROADS? Well, 𝐶ROADS is is a model about countries. En-ROADS is about actions, policies, and solutions. So that's the big distinction. 𝐶ROADS, what should or could happen in China, in India, in the European Union, in the US, and other developed, etc. And it looks at the international dynamics, particularly in support of the Paris Agreement, the Copenhagen Accord, and the collaborations via the UN. Whereas, as you saw with En-ROADS, is about coal, oil, gas, energy efficiency, agriculture, population, on and on and on. That's the big distinction. Both are helpful. We play both games when I lead my students through an experience with addressing climate. First, we play world climate to understand the international dynamics. Then we play the climate action simulation and the En-ROADS workshop to understand the solution dynamics. Both are helpful, they're complementary, and all the materials on the website. I'm curious along the way, maybe while we're answering questions, I'm posting another poll. I'm curious, what's your biggest concern about leading an event or meeting with En-ROADS? There it is posted. I'm just curious to see what is the most on your mind. But another question, Bindu or Yazi, as people answer the poll?
Yeah, I can see a good question here. How can the model say that a huge tech breakthrough at low cost deployed tomorrow at large scale is not enough? Isn't this subjective? So here's a question from Frank.
I think I need to hear a little more slowly. How can you say that if there is a breakthrough in what?
At low cost, deployed tomorrow. Why is it not enough?
Oh, great. And when you say a breakthrough, you mean a breakthrough in energy supply, like a new technology in energy supply. Do you think what they mean?
Yeah, it's not clear, but I imagine that is what the person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a question about one particular scenario. And so I'm going to pull that up. And let's look at it here. So one of the levers here in the model is new technology. And if you look underneath here,
just to chime in here, I think when folks are filling out the poll that they're not able to see your screen. So I think
thank you. Okay, let me go back. And okay, let's just finish the poll and then I'm going to answer the new tech question. So I'm closing the poll and I'm going to share the results. What is your biggest concern about leading an event? Facilitating the group well. Perfect. And you're in the right place because we're going to teach you how to facilitate it well. Explaining the model well. Perfect. Come to classes 2, 3, 4, and 5. Particularly 4 and 5 will focus on explaining the model well. Getting people to attend. Absolutely. It's interesting, Yazi and Bindu, we could spend some time on helping people how to market this and how to engage people or others. This is just good for us to know. Thank you. I'm going to close that. So now, can you see the model?
yes.
Yazi? Okay.
Yep.
So the question was about new technology. How would it be that if a new technology was discovered immediately, it wouldn't solve the problem? So I'm going to make this really big. What we imagine with new technology is that nuclear fusion or thorium-based nuclear fission. What if we had a breakthrough? And so what we're going to say is, you can see in the detailed settings, the breakthrough year is going to be in 2020. And that is, it comes out of the lab and then it gets commercialized. It takes a while to figure out how to make it work at a commercial scale, but then it will compete with coal, oil, and gas and spread around the world. So when we simulated it, first imagine, why does it help the climate? And any new technology helps in as much as it keeps coal, oil, and gas safely in the ground. So what we had to think was, how does it and how soon will it displace burning coal, oil, and gas? So watch as, and imagine, you think that 4.1 might go down. Actually, what would be people's guess? Let's just, the people who are still on, if you're still game to do this, write into your question box. I'm gonna actually get to look. I haven't seen the question box this whole time. Somebody write in your question box, if it's discovered in 2020, how much temperature would go down from 4.1 to what? What would be your guess of how much it should? And here this says, well, go ahead. What time, or excuse me, what temperature? So someone write in there in your question box, what temperature would you imagine it should go to? Maybe we don't have it. Oh, 3.5 said Edrit. Thank you. 3.5. So someone's saying it would help a lot, but not be a real silver bullet. Wouldn't get us to 2 degrees. Others, 4.1 to 3.6. 4 says Roger. You guys maybe have tried it yourself. 3.7 said Donna. I think some of you wisely tried it yourself. So let's try it. And you guys were right. If it's a small breakthrough or a huge breakthrough, 3.9, 3.8. Now, the main insight here is not the answer, it is why. And that's what's so critical is why is that happening? The short version is it takes a long time to displace fossil fuels. Why does it take a long time? Well, first of all, it takes, in this case, I think, no, just 10 years to commercialize is what we assumed. So it takes 10 years to commercialize around 2030. Then it's really cheap, and we can go and see how cheap. Look here and see, here's cost of energy, and really encourage you, if you're serious about the model, look around a good bit. It gets cheap, but it only gets cheaper than coal. It gets out here and gets cheaper and cheaper out in the 2030s. Here it is, cheaper and cheaper. Then it's getting a good bit of market share for new investment, but not all of it. Coal, oil, and gas are still inexpensive. And in India, in China, in South Africa, in other countries around the world that are developing electrical capacity, they're also giving some market share to other things. Countries have coal. Even if there is available in the world a new technology, their energy independence goals, but also just coal is still relatively inexpensive and they're investing in it. The other factor is that the existing capacity lasts 30 years. And just because there's a new supply doesn't mean you immediately throw out your old coal and gas resources. You also, well, you're going to hang on to those resources. So it's going to take some time. So notice how much time it takes that orange area to grow. Because of that, greenhouse gas and net emissions don't really depart until 2030, 2035, and then they're somewhat lower, and we get an important reduction in temperature, but it's relatively modest. So first answer, it takes a long time for the infrastructure to turn over to this new low carbon infrastructure. Second reason, this spreads around the world because it's inexpensive. You can see it reduces overall energy prices. Cost of energy goes down. If energy is cheap, what happens to energy demand? The use of energy. Well, there's something called the rebound effect. Cheaper energy means more consumption of energy. So you have a slight boost in energy use at a time when really what we need is energy efficiency and other things to reduce energy use. This is what we need. We don't need it going up. We need it actually going down. So 2 big reasons, the slow turnover of the energy infrastructure, and then secondly, a rebound effect leads to a relatively modest contribution. Now, mind you, it still would be great if we had that contribution, but we also need to couple it with, well, energy efficiency, perhaps a carbon price, deforestation, afforestation, methane, and many other things to get us well below 2 degrees. So that's the answer on renewable. And there's a whole video on this that you can go to the website and see this explanation if you want to watch it again. Other questions that you see coming up, Yazzie and Bindu?
Yeah, I have a couple questions here of folks asking about kind of the target audience for these events and if there are age limits and
Yeah.
who might they use this model for.
So we have designed this for a wide range of people. And you can see, of course, underneath there are a lot of complex information that you should be able to handle conversations with climate people who are quite engaged in this field. When it comes to younger people or people who are new to this issue, you can see that we've really set this up, we hope, to be engaging to people who are as young as 12 or 13-year-olds. I've run this with kids, students who are 12 or 13, 14, high school kids, 15, 16, 17, because you're able to just have a conversation to say, hey, what do we know to do about climate change? And people say, oh, well, we need renewable energy. Yes, what else? Well, we should probably eat less meat. Right, over here, what about other things? We should grow trees. People are able to think about these actions in a very broad level. So we hope it can be engaging to very young people as well as to experts. So there's no real limit in how young people are. And just encourage you to translate things and be a good explainer using these kinds of tools. Also, we find that young people are very adept with computers. Many of them around the world are able to play games and play the roles that we've set up in the game very well. Other questions or topics?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great questions. I wonder if many of them will be answered in our upcoming webinars.
Great.
So I think if folks stick around a little bit for those upcoming webinars, we should answer your questions in a lot more detail.
I think that sounds good. And the last thing I would leave you with would be another invitation to join the next webinar. And let's find that link again. I think under webinars, you know, there's next week is how to lead the workshop. But also we're going to have another session, which is the workshop itself, right here, the En-ROADS Climate Workshop. So here you get to see us not engaging facilitators like you, but just the world. Here is on May 19th. You can register for this workshop and come and see either at 7 a.m. Or at 2 p.m. Come and just join a workshop and see how we actually use it. Could you send this link, Yazzie or Bindu, to everybody?
Sent.
If you really want to go a level deeper, come to this workshop and see how we engage people in the world. But I think we will say, come sign up for, or keep coming back to our webinars, and we'll be continuing next week at same time, and we'll dive more deeply into how to lead the En-ROADS Climate Workshop. So we're going to wrap up now. Keep up the good work. Hope to see you again, and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.